Joseph?
What is also important to note that the budget's determined by the regents, and I think that that's also a factor in working with those relationships. I just wanted to make the point that one of the biggest problems with the SFRB is the idea of reoccurring funding for certain student organizations. It's the talk of above and below the line. And groups that are below the line are not eligible for reoccurring funding, even though some of them have been receiving funding through the SFRB process for years. And I think that's also something we need to change and get rid of above and below the line distinctions.
Katie?
Yeah, I just wanted to address briefly the fact that the SFRB task force has some student representatives on it, and that those student representatives were appointed by the administration. They are not in any way appointed by an elected official with the GPSA, like the president or a council chair or anyone. They aren't elected from the student body. So those student representatives are hand-selected by the people who put the task force together. So I don't think that we've had representation on that board whatsoever, and the Student Fee Review Board certainly never suggested that we change the representation. I would love to hear how Joseph has worked together with the task force, because as far as I'm aware, he's not on that board, so I'm not sure in what capacity you are on that board as of
A few months ago.
So they haven't met since October, have they?
No, they have not.
And they're going to meet again at the end of March.
You can comment about it afterwards as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Sure.
about that.
Patricia? Despite increasing enrollments and an influx of out-of-state research dollars, the university is likely to propose steep tuition hikes. Do you support or oppose these tuition increases, and why?
Well, I will never support across-the-board tuition increases. And I think that, and the reason I say never at this point is because in this particular case, at this university, at this time, we have not been provided the justification for tuition increases. We have not been provided the financial statements, the financial and budget reasons. We have not been able to, we've been asking for reports, for those financial reports and justifications so that we can analyze and assess whether in fact there is a necessity. We have been at the liberty of those that have been involved in the processes telling us this is part of the process and this is a necessity. However, this goes back to what we've been discussing as a student body as a whole, and that is that the burden is always placed on the shoulders of the students. It's always put on the burden is placed on faculty and staff. The three most important bodies and foundations of the university. We have development offices, we have foundation money, we have endowment money, we have invested funds that are at this very moment accruing interest and growing. They've been invested 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. How are those monies being used to leverage the shortfalls? Where, and the students have been raising the issue of upper administration, too many vice presidents, too much money going to hire to paying for an administration that is management heavy at the top. And so there's a lot of questions that are revolving around the budget itself and these decisions, and there are more questions than answers. We've been given what is comfortable to be given, what is public, the audit reports that are done, that are required by law. That's what's been given to us. We haven't been able to see and assess or determine whether in fact there is a necessity for that amount of a tuition increase. It seems to be the easiest area to target for increase every time we have this, or we're faced in this budget crisis. However, it's the students that are having to deal with the entire burden of this. And so I never want to look at tuition increases as being the answer. to budgetary crisis. And it goes back to planning. It goes back to maximizing and leveraging the monies that we do have available and accessible to us as an institution. We are government and tuition and student dependent. We don't look for outside resources. Thank you.
Katie?
So 60% of graduate students do not have any other source of funding to cover their tuition or fees. They don't have TAs, they don't have GAs, they don't have research assistantships. Their funding, their tuition and fees come directly out of their pocket into the university. And so I think that that situation tells us right off the bat how important the question of our tuition is to graduate students. Something like a third of students who take out student loans in order to cover their education end up defaulting on those loans within the next 10 years of their graduation. And so I think we have a situation nationally where we are funding education with student debt that ends up not being paid. And economically, that's going to have huge repercussions for our nation, ultimately. But bringing it back here to the University of New Mexico, I am absolutely against tuition increases and fee increases. I am fighting those. I am doing that work now. As part of the cost containment committee, I've sat around the table and tried to hold the administration accountable. We have too many vice presidents. We have 19 vice presidents, and they make a lot of money. And perhaps the conversation is, oh, should we change their title? I respond to no. Changing somebody's title doesn't help us. What we need to do is make sure that the resources are going to where our limited resources should go. So for example, if we cut a vice president, we could hire an internationally recognized faculty member who with them, they could bring in their research dollars to the state so that we're actually pulling from a larger pool of money and increasing the research the University of New Mexico can do by getting rid of a vice president. We're probably going to be facing an 8 or 9% increase in tuition. And, as part of that, you have to realize that the president made a suggestion, line items, to include $750,000 for new faculty, $250,000 in order to take care of additional GAs and TAs at this university. And obviously I'm pro-faculty, I'm pro-students. But that $1 million increase that the president made represents $100 extra that every student has to pay at this university. That's a 1% increase in tuition. I say, let's fund those faculty, let's fund those GAs and TAs, and spend more carefully our money elsewhere. Should we be funding the ever-increasing costs of administration? Should we be funding non-academic costs like athletics that don't go directly to our academic mission? $1 million of IMG funding goes towards athletics. Well, that's $1 million for faculty and graduate students right there.
Joseph?
I'm also opposed to tuition increases. I mean, obviously we all want to keep tuition low and affordable, and I think that's a huge priority not just at the university, but across our entire state. But I think we need to be realistic about this. There are certain things that are inevitable, and tuition increases are part of that. But I think that what we can do is help minimize them as much as possible. Certain costs do increase, and there are certain things that we don't have control over. And I think it's unreasonable to say that tuition will never increase. Everything increases. Look at gas or groceries or any other commodity that you buy at a store. But I think that if we work with a strong voice with the university, we can make sure that these increases are minimal if they happen, and then that they are spent for priorities for students. I agree with Katie 100% that we do need to spend less money at this university for administrative costs, and I think more should be put in towards faculty, research, and graduate and TA positions. But I think that it's necessary to prioritize all these items, but also look at it from a realistic standpoint, and that some things will increase, and we just need to be prepared for it, and have that open conversation and dialogue with the administration and with the Board of Regents, where we have priorities for funding, and if there is an increase, that it doesn't go towards administration, that it goes towards the core mission and value of the university.
Jacob?
Thank you. This has been a central theme of my campaign. essentially, we're talking about two related issues. One is resource allocation at the institutional level. And I said yesterday, and I'll say again, stakeholder groups like GPSA, ASUNM, the faculty, and the staff have not been brought to the table early enough or in enough of a substantive way to adequately influence the budget process to get us to a place where we can have a real voice in trying to move some money from administration to line items that actually support students. That's why yesterday I called upon the university to include GPSA, ASUNM, the faculty and staff on the Regents Budget Committee. That's the committee that crafts the budget for this university. If we get representation there and start engaging in those discussions and bringing these concerns to the table earlier and with a louder voice, we won't be in this situation year after year. Now, I think Joseph is absolutely correct. The notion that you can never see an increase in tuition is wrong, and it just isn't going to happen, and I'm not going to say that I'll work for that because I'll never achieve that goal. No university in this country has seen flat tuition for many years, and in fact, the American Association of Colleges and Universities reported that since 1970, the proportion of tuition as a percentage of the operating revenue of public universities has increased by over 300% because state support continues to decline. New Mexico funds 15% of the operating budget of this university. That level of funding is not stable, and we're seeing it decrease year by year. And that's why I've consistently talked in this campaign that if we really want to address this problem, it's just not a conversation with the regents, which has to happen and is absolutely important. It's a conversation with John Arthur Smith, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, with Quique Saavedra, the chairman of the House Appropriations and Finance Committee, and with the governor's office, to try and get a handle on where do we want to be as a state in the level of support we give to our institutions and how much we expect our students to contribute to fund those operations. And until we do that, we're going to continue relying on the tuition credit as the flawed mechanism for controlling cost growth, and we're going to continue having these debates, and we're going to continue being in the same spot that we're always in. That's why I've proposed a new way forward, and I really hope that we can start talking about how we address this issue at the state level, because that's the only way you're going to solve the problem.
Any rebuttals?
I think it goes back also to the information, and I keep driving this point about the information that we need in order to take positions and set plans in motion and bring the people together that need to be brought together. We need to know what are the sources of revenues, what are our investments, where are they invested, what is our financial portfolio, who is supporting the institution, what are the names of those foundations, how much money is brought in terms of endowments. We have to have the necessary information in order to be able to combat these major issues that are facing us, including the tuition increases. We cannot just accept the financial and audited statements. This does not give us the full picture of this university. The sources of income and the sources of revenue, the subsidized, the unsubsidized, the restricted and the unrestricted, that is key information that we need as students in order to empower us to move forward.